let's start with just the first game of this series. I mean, Chris Paul has kind of already been identified as the darling of this NBA Finals, just with the background, the context, him finally trying to get this off his back. But if Milwaukee wants to win this series, what do they need to do better?
Yeah, contain Chris Paul is the easy answer. Him and Devin Booker coming into the series, I don't think it was a secret. Those are the two guys that you got to stop. And what makes them so challenging is their mid-range game. I think the Bucks and a lot of teams would be perfectly happy yielding the shot selection that Chris Paul and Devin Booker got in game one. A lot of those are tough shots. And if you're the Bucks, you want someone to take that shot, get the rebound. Maybe Giannis brings it down. You kick it up the floor. You've got some transition offense humming along right away. But it's a lot harder to do that when all the shots go in. So there will probably be some defensive adjustments on how they defend. They've been switching a lot. That has enabled Chris Paul to get matched up with Brook Lopez, who is more comfortable around the basket. He's a tremendous defender, but there's an opportunity there to hit those mid-range shots over the 7-footer, because he's not going to get all the way out there to contest everything. And maybe it's just Jrue Holiday who's up against Chris Paul, or just on Devin Booker, and less of the switching. But I mean, quite honestly, if Paul does that every game, the Bucks are in trouble. Like Phoenix probably has some elements there that the Bucks can't account for, no matter their personnel. So I think there's a little bit of hope there that the Bucks will not see that level of Phoenix play going forward.
And what do you think? Do you think that they'll be able to bring that kind of intensity in the next game, or do you anticipate that there will be at least some kind of leveling off with the production that we saw in the first game?
I do think there'll be some leveling off, but I guess I don't have a lot of evidence. Haven't seen enough of Phoenix to know. I mean, they've certainly looked good in these playoffs, and I think if you're a Bucks fan, you should be concerned that Phoenix is the better team, particularly if Giannis isn't 100%. But there is some history. If you're a Bucks fan, the Bucks lost game one of the Eastern Conference Finals. They lost game one of the series before that in Brooklyn, and both of those were kind of a different level of heartbreak. Brooklyn just crushed the Bucks and made it look like there was no way Milwaukee was going to win that series. And then against Atlanta, game one at home at Pfizer Forum, a couple blocks behind me, the Bucks had the game and just blew it. I mean, this was not that. This wasn't a heartbreak game. Phoenix was always going to win that game, it seems like, in any scenario. The Bucks just have to learn from it and do better, and that's exactly what they did these last two series. They've got a history under Mike Budenholzer, actually, of dropping game one in the playoffs, and they've bounced back a lot of times. So we have some recent evidence to suggest that that's what this Bucks team can do too, particularly if Giannis is going to be a factor like we saw in game one.
Well, what do you know about how healthy he actually is? I mean, to see his status kind of ebb and flow before game one, and then, like you said, I mean, to get some contributions from him, where do you think he actually is physically?
Yeah, the Bucks are really tight-lipped about stuff like that. They're understandably going to play close to the vest. This has always been the case with Giannis. Whenever he's incurred any sort of injury, you're just not going to get a lot out of them, out of Mike Budenholzer, out of Giannis himself. I think the proof is just what we saw on tape. He's effective and a factor, and that's certainly more than the Bucks could have hoped for when they saw him go down just 1 week earlier from game one week to the day, an injury that looked like it might cost him the rest of this season, most of next season. I mean, we were all fearing the worst, and it didn't turn out that way. That he played in game one is amazing, and that he gave you 20 points and 17 rebounds is even more amazing. Maybe not 100%, clearly. I mean, on defense particularly, he might be just a step slower than you might see. But then again, he has that chase down block. I mean, all the signs tell you, at the very least, he's going to be a factor. And again, that's more than the Bucks could have hoped for. Unfortunately for the Bucks, they probably need him to be even better, something close to 100% to hang with this Phoenix team, which in that case, I think it would be a really even matchup. Still going to hinge a little bit on how healthy he gets. Is he going to be 100% defensively? Because they're going to need everything they've got to stop Booker and Paul. And DeAndre Ayton is the sort of third guy who's picking up whatever Paul and Booker leave on the table for him. So, you'll probably need a little bit more from Giannis, but still gave much more than the Bucks could have hoped for in game one.
Everyone's focus is on Chris Paul, and rightly so, because of how snake-bitten he's been in the playoffs, and what a story this would be if he could pull this off with the talented Phoenix team, as you bring up. But I wonder, for Milwaukee fans, or for those who kind of have followed the trajectory of Giannis's career, I kind of think about how many chances is Giannis Antetokounmpo going to have to win a title, particularly in Milwaukee? I mean, what's your read on that? Are the stakes maybe not just as high, but still pretty high for a player like that to make it to the NBA Finals and to ultimately win a title.
Absolutely true. And it isn't even so much about Giannis, who's 26 years old. He'll turn 27 in December, and he's got a lot of veterans around him. It's probably more about how effective Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton are going to be over the next 4 years. I mean, they're going to be here, barring kind of a blockbuster trade. So this is the cast that they've gone with. And Brook Lopez, as well, is an aging veteran. PJ Tucker probably won't be back next year, although I have no idea, but he's 36 years old. They're going to have to find new supporting pieces to go around Giannis at some point. And this formula worked. I mean, they got to the NBA Finals. They caught some breaks, but they're here playing probably the best version of the Bucks that they've had over the last 3 years. So they're definitely capable of making the right adjustments and adding the right personnel. But it's going to be tough to maintain that as guys around Giannis get older. They're going to have to find new playmakers. Right now, this Bucks team isn't very deep. They don't have like a guy waiting in the wings who's going to step up and become a reliable third or fourth scoring option immediately next year. So those guys are going to come from outside the organization, or they're just going to ride with the people who got there. So, Giannis still very young. His story has many more chapters to go. I don't think this is certainly a win now or bust situation for his career at all. But there will be work to be done. I mean, this is getting to the finals as a window, right? Like, no guarantee you'll ever be back. So this has to be a moment to take advantage of.
You say, JR, that Milwaukee's kind of the best version of themselves that we've seen in the past couple of seasons. I think people who really knew basketball and knew everything that Jrue Holiday could offer, defensively in particular, knew that when he came to the group, that was going to ultimately change the dynamic. But as you assess this team and have covered this team in the past, what is it about this group, in your opinion, to where you feel like this is them at max threshold compared to other disappointments that we've seen in the past, despite having somewhat of a talented group and, of course, Giannis?
Yeah, Jrue Holiday is the answer to a lot of those questions. I mean, they had Eric Bledsoe in years past, and Bledsoe, elite defensive player, quality defender, just not an offensive threat the way that Jrue Holiday is. And Holiday had a bad game one offensively, and I think even throughout the playoffs, we haven't seen Jrue Holiday anything like what he was in the regular season on offense. He's still very involved defensively, still a first-team All-NBA defender and a guy who's handing out a ton of assists. But the shots just aren't falling for him. He's not alone in that capacity, but he really is a difference maker for this Bucks team. And they really committed this year. Mike Budenholzer took some criticism over the last couple of years for being inflexible and how that burned them in the postseason, was him just sticking to his guns that prevented them from being able to make adjustments when teams like the Miami Heat or the Toronto Raptors 2 years ago adjusted to him and to the Bucks. This year they decided we're going to work more on switching defense. We're going to work more with our big five guys, not use our bench as much, get them into a system where they're comfortable and experiment a little bit. Yeah, I'll take a few more regular season losses, and they did. They were the best team in the NBA the last 2 years, regular season record-wise. Didn't have that this year, but they felt they were more prepared for the postseason for a team like the Brooklyn Nets, which they saw in the Eastern Conference semifinals. It worked out great for a challenge like Atlanta or Philadelphia, whoever they see in the Eastern Conference finals. And now here, a team like Phoenix that it does a lot of different things offensively and is a load to handle, because if Paul and Booker are somehow having an off night, they've still got DeAndre Ayton, and they've got a great defensive intensity with guys like Michael Bridges, Jake Crowder. Like, this is the real deal in Phoenix. So they're prepared. They're at this place now. It's just a matter of guys executing. We didn't see it in game one in complete package with Jrue Holiday struggling a little bit. If all three of their guys are clicking at one time, though, they're going to win games in this series and absolutely threaten to win the whole thing.
Is that one of the keys for you heading into the next game, is Holiday just figuring out how to pick it up on the offensive end? This is kind of a double question, sorry, but obviously they're going to have to figure out a way to contain Chris Paul, but is there a matchup that you're looking at that maybe we're not paying as much attention to, but that could be critical in terms of giving them that offensive boost that they need?
They probably do need to find a way to get Holiday defensively more matched up with Paul and with Booker. The Suns were able to switch away from Holiday. They got a lot of Brook Lopez matchup. Brook Lopez didn't end up seeing a lot of time in the second half. They probably need to commit more to Holiday doing the work defensively. Now, when you do that, you don't know how that's going to impact his offensive game, which is already scuffling. I don't know if you can expect him to, A, shut down one of those guys and also pick it up on offense, but that would be nice if it happened. I mean, like, if their shooting is what it was in game one, that was an outlier. They've struggled from the three-point line big time throughout this postseason, particularly in the Nets and Hawks series. they had it back a little bit in game one. I mean, honestly, you look across the board and you ignore free throw shooting, which is a big area where Phoenix had the advantage in game one. The Bucks held their own in a lot of ways. So if they can just, maybe Booker and Paul miss a few more shots, that would be the luck part of it. But maybe they do find a way defensively to mitigate what those guys do. I think the Bucks have to feel okay about it, particularly because they now know that Giannis can be a factor in this series, that he's healthy enough to do that. So, I don't want to say that it's not the same game plan. It definitely isn't. They got to make some changes. But a lot of the things they did worked on kind of a sneaky level. So I would suspect some of this stuff is going to be the same.
Yeah, it wasn't, a blowout by any stretch. And I think you would agree that there were some good things that we saw. It's just a matter of, hey, how do we close the gap and figure out how to play with our backs against the wall a little bit, like you mentioned they've been able to do in the past in previous series. How many games do you anticipate them winning in this series? I mean, is this a scenario where Budenholzer will rally the guys, make some small adjustments, maybe make some matchup adjustments, and you expect them to respond?
Every episode we've seen with the Bucks, they have responded. Game one against the Hawks, they lost. They came back and had maybe their best game of the playoffs in game two. Game 1 and 2, disaster against Brooklyn. They come back, they tie the series, then they lose in game 5, and it kind of looks like the season's over. And they come back and win both 6 and 7. Very impressive finish for the Milwaukee Bucks in that series. Boston Celtics, I go back to 2019 when they ended up in the Eastern Conference Finals. They lost game 1. They bounced back and won that series in 5. The Bucks have done this before, and they have found a way. And yeah, I have faith that that's something they can do again. It would not surprise me to see them win in Phoenix. Phoenix is a tougher test certainly than Atlanta. Certainly than the Boston team I'm mentioning. I mean, Phoenix is a really complete team. So I think they probably also need some fortuitous breaks in addition to those adjustments to steal a game out of Phoenix. But I can just go by the history of Mike Budenholzer Bucks teams. And this stuff happens. They're not the most consistent team in the world. They do have off nights. And I don't even know if game 1 was completely an off night. It wasn't their best. I know that they can play their best. And, again, if Middleton, Holiday, and Giannis are all competing at the same time, at a really high level, I do think that's going to be tough for Phoenix to win in that scenario, and we haven't seen a lot of that in this postseason.
Why do you think a lack of consistency, particularly at the beginning of these series, is something that Milwaukee has struggled with in the past?
Yeah, I wish I knew. I mean, the shooting is honestly a puzzle. This is a 39% shooting team from beyond the arc in the regular season. We just haven't not seen that. They've been up until game 1 of the finals, really. I mean, they were shooting 32, 33, sometimes 30% on 3-point shots and still taking the same volume. They're good looks. They're not forced in many cases. Bryn Forbes off the bench just hasn't been there. He had a couple shots in game 1, so that was encouraging. But, Bobby Portis is a guy who sometimes gives that energy off the bench. Defensively, I'm not sure he's as good a fit in this Phoenix series as he was in Atlanta, so that could tighten the bench a little bit. Pat Connaughton's got to hit a couple shots a game from wide open. He's going to get those chances. PJ Tucker's a defensive guy. He gets a lot of corner threes. He really struggled offensively in game 1. He's got to hit a couple more shots. It's kind of just everybody going a little bit cold at the same time. And Middleton's had moments where he's taken over. And even Holiday has shown in brief spurts offensively, he could still do that. He's still confident, but it's just all gone cold at the same time. I can't explain it. I bet they can't either. They just got to keep running crisp offense and getting those looks and hope that eventually things go down. They have, game 2 against the Hawks that worked. Maybe game 2 against the Suns it works as well. I don't know.
Just before I let you go, probably kept you for too long already, but I like the identity of this series with these two teams matched up, just in the fact that, we don't have that stalwart player, that star franchise where you've got guys who have won titles before. I mean, outside of this whole Chris Paul story of him really trying to get that monkey off his back, there's a lot of guys and some veterans who have been in the NBA for a long time that are on both of these squads that would really like to win a championship. I mean, from what you know about Milwaukee and some of the newer guys who have joined the roster, what does this mean to them? I mean, I know a lot of the focus is going to be on getting it for Chris Paul, getting it done, but what's going on inside Milwaukee's locker room?
It's a weird finals, isn't it? Because you're used to seeing a LeBron team or a Kobe team or somebody who's won a million rings already competing. Maybe it's Dwayne Wade. I don't know, but yeah, this is a little different. Nobody on either team has won a championship ring before, and we only know Torrey Craig for sure is going to win one because he played on the Bucks earlier this year, and now he's in Phoenix coming off the bench, so he's guaranteed. He's got his ring. But for everybody else, it's up for grabs. Yeah, Paul's obviously the storyline. I mean, of course, these guys are extremely motivated to do this. Brook Lopez has been in the league forever. He has completely revolutionized his game. He was a back-to-the-basket center defender for the Nets. He became a three-point threat. He's still a tremendous defender, really an interesting player. I mean, that's a guy who's been around a long time. Jrue Holiday with the 76ers and the Pelicans, he hasn't really had a chance to be part of a team like this. And Giannis is a two-time MVP who's, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday, Defensive Player of the Year. He's a star, and kind of would be the right moment, 26 years old, to sort of launch, a championship run or something. And certainly Milwaukee would love that. Like, Milwaukee hasn't had an NBA final since 1974. They haven't had the title since their one title in 1971 when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a second-year player. So this is totally uncharted territory for Milwaukee. We never get to this point. The Milwaukee Brewers haven't been to the World Series since 1982 and never won a World Series. So this is a huge deal for this town. Everybody's very much in on the Bucks, and obviously this would be just an uncharted territory. Like, Milwaukee fans are very used to being let down. And obviously right now they're in a really good spot.
Yeah, hopefully not the case this time around. JR, thanks for being with us. Just real quick, before I let you go, I know you host a podcast as well for Bucks fans who might be catching this somehow and might be interested in a little bit more in-depth discussion with the Bucks. Where can people find you there?
Yeah, it's called the Point Forward Podcast. It's with Jim Ozarski, who's the main Bucks beat reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. He's in Phoenix right now, covering the game for us and covering the games. We chat every week about the Milwaukee Bucks. We've been doing it for a while. Feel free to give that a listen if anybody's interested. And everything we have on the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel website, jsonline.com. We've got tons of stuff looking at this series. It's been a content fountain, going to the NBA Finals for the first time in anybody's lifetime here. So it's been a really good time.
That's not a bad thing. You'd rather have a content fountain than a dried content retention pond.
Absolutely true. Yes.
Thanks so much for being with us, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon. Maybe after you guys win it all, after Milwaukee wins it all. Who knows?
Sounds great. Take care.